What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So I have finished The Evil Within 2. Took me about 14 to 15 hours on my first playthrough, and it's funny because it took me that long and I still didn't explore absolutely every corner of The Evil Within 2's universe. There was a lot to see in regards to The Evil Within 2 because they decided to go with some linear chapters along with some open world chapters, and I kind of want to get straight into it with The Evil Within. Now, overall, it is a good review. However, it's not perfect. The game is not perfect, and I have some opinions that I want to share with you guys about the game. You guys might remember that a couple of months ago, it might even just be a month ago, time goes too fast for me, I did a video talking to you all about what I would like to see from The Evil Within 2, and just talking about some of the things that I really disliked from the first game. Now, I'm happy to say that The Evil Within 2 definitely exceeded my expectations, and I gotta say, I had a lot of fun playing this game, so much so that I will play it again. Now, replay value, it's really important to me because games nowadays, they're extremely expensive, and the last thing you want is to pay however much it is for the game in order just to play it through once. It's pointless. You want to have a good experience, but then you want to go back through it and have a look and see everything that you missed. Now, because The Evil Within 2 decided to go down a little bit of a different route from the first game, we have a couple of chapters in the game where it seems to go from being quite linear, like the first game, to then chapter 3, for example, where there is so much for you to explore. I actually found myself not really knowing where to start in regards to that. Now, luckily, I came across my crossbow, which that weapon is extremely useful in The Evil Within. You obviously get your freeze bolts, you get your exploding bolts and your shock bolts and things like that, and obviously you can use them on all the different enemies within the game. I don't really want to touch on the story too much in this video because I want to focus more on the gameplay aspects, and obviously a lot of you may have not finished the game just yet because obviously it did come out last Friday, and a lot of us, we have other things to do. We can't always just focus on very long games, but the game is pretty long for your first playthrough. Now, the only thing I am going to say about the story is that The Evil Within 1, the story got very complicated towards the end, which is why we ended up with 3 DLCs to try and go along with the story. But the second game, it's a lot simpler, and it kind of ties up a lot of the loose ends from the first game. And of course, our nurse lady friend is back so that she can help us upgrade Sebastian. Now, a few of the things I spoke about in my video about what I would like to see from The Evil Within 2 was mainly talking about stamina, for one, because if you guys remember from the first game, the stamina was such an issue. And it was one of the first things that, yes, we could level up, but there were so many other things that we had to do so early on that we kind of all ended up forgetting about the stamina. So the stamina in the second game, such an improvement. And maybe it's silly just to focus on the one thing like that, but I know for me personally, I found the game to be quite tricky without being able to run away and hide from the enemies. Now, the second game is very much a stealth game. Now, I haven't played it obviously for my second playthrough just yet, but the typical thing with The Evil Within is that it's a survival game and you need to think. You cannot just rush in and expect to just shoot everything. You don't have the ammo for that. You certainly can't take the hits for that, and your stamina will run out when you try and run away. So you gotta be careful, and The Evil Within 2 does this very well. Now, one thing I hated about the first game was the controls. I felt that the game wanted you to be stealth, but it didn't have the controls to properly hide behind things. Now, with The Evil Within 2, you can hide behind the wall, you can then kind of sprint to the other side. It's got a lot more features when it comes to actually playing the game stealthy. Also, you can upgrade Sebastian so that he can do stealth kills when the enemy is coming towards you, and that honestly was something I really needed. They took away the matches, which I wasn't sure if they were going to bring that back or not, but this time you could just stomp on your enemies and kill them when they were on the ground, which again, that is something that we needed in the first game. It's such a basic feature in a survival horror game where if the enemy goes on the ground, I need to be able to take their heads off by stomping on them. So thank you, Evil Within 2, for putting that in the game. Going back to the open world side of things. So personally, I found it a little bit weird at first, because the first Evil Within, very linear game, you go from chapter to chapter and it takes you on this adventure with the story. But with the Evil Within 2, it starts off very dark, quite deep, And then suddenly it puts you into this open world section where you have free reign to go wherever you want to go. And while this is a good and a bad thing, personally for me, I felt that it took away a lot of the scariness from the second game. The first game was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. You had to go a certain way, but by having all these open world areas in the second game, it's basically forcing you to run if it gets too scary. Another game that did this recently was Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, where you had a chapter that was kind of dedicated to free roaming, and then suddenly once you got out of that chapter, that was it. There was no more free roam. And it's the same with The Evil Within 2. There's a couple of chapters where you can kind of backtrack and things like that. But then it goes back into the linear parts of the story, which is typical Evil Within. And I don't know. It was a weird pacing for me. 1 minute you're on the way and you're finding out about the story, and then suddenly you can spend 5 or 6 hours on one chapter. For me, it didn't work. I didn't like it. I also didn't like the fact that there's a lot of quite important story issues hidden within the side quests. For example, you guys have been commenting on my videos letting me know that there's a kind of ghost lady within some of the backstory, and I missed her completely. Not once did I see that ghost lady. I would have freaked out so bad because I've looked up a few videos on her and I don't know who she is because I don't recognize her from the first game, and she looks absolutely terrifying, and it makes me sad that things like this are hidden behind side quests when clearly they're quite important, and they've got that scare factor as well, and that's one thing that Evil Within 2 was missing. It had its moments, and then it just went back to being a stealth game, and it wasn't really that scary. There was no boss fights that had your heart going. Unlike the first game when you had to fight Laura and you had to fight the Keeper. I think he's called the Keeper, that's what I always just called him. And the second game just didn't give me that scare that I was after. I wanted to be terrified, and towards the end of the game, I just found myself like, well, I've got a gun and I'm in this big open world area, so I'm not scared really, and I'm just gonna go for it. Maybe some people like that. For me, I'm gonna do the comparison to the first game, because the first game, I felt terrified from start to finish. Every moment felt like my last, but with the Evil Within 2, the open world, it didn't do it for me, unfortunately. So you could do side missions and things like that, which is new to the Evil Within, and obviously you could meet some other characters and you could follow their story within Mobius. And I gotta say that I did enjoy that. Obviously I got to get the backstory on a lot of the other agents who were already inside of Mobius, but again, a little bit annoying that some of those were hidden behind side quests. Given that this game is so open world in some of the chapters, I thought it was very cool that they gave us the crafting feature. So even if you were out in the world and you were running low on supplies, as long as you were picking up things as you were going, you could actually craft syringes if you were desperate, and you could craft ammunition if you couldn't find any, but obviously at a cost. So if you were crafting out in the world, it was going to cost you more equipment and materials than if you were actually at your workbench in Sebastian's, little pod or whatever, his little room as we're gonna call it. So I really liked that aspect, because in the first game I always found myself suffering and searching for ammo and I could never find it, and the melee was useless. So I really like that in the second one the melee was better. You could craft bullets and you could craft syringes and bolts and things like that, and it was needed. I think that it was the right upgrades considering the open world sections of the game. The game itself reminded me a lot of The Last of Us, I have to say. The enemies reminded me a lot of clickers. Some of them, I don't know if it was just the design on their faces, but it definitely reminded me of the clickers, and the stealth aspect of things was definitely The Last of Us. I can't help but feel like they took a little bit of inspiration from how The Last of Us worked, and it controlled like I was playing as Joel from The Last of Us. I don't know, I want to know what you guys think about that, because just with the way the game looked and the way it played, there was so much of me that was like, God, this is like The Last of Us 2, it's crazy. And it had a little bit of a Resident Evil 4 feel in there as well. At one point, I think it's from chapter 4 onwards, you can actually unlock a shooting range within Sebastian's house section. I don't know what you would call his section. It's just where his safe place with the cat and the slides and things like that. Yeah, so you can unlock a shooting range in there to obviously upgrade and get some extra items and things like that. So the game was really generous when it came to you upgrading Sebastian. Now, of course, when you finish the game, you do get a new game plus. so you can go into the same difficulty or the lower difficulty with all your weapons and your upgrades. But of course, if you want to go for the harder difficulties, you basically start with nothing until you've completed it again. So I definitely want to replay survival and go back to chapter 3 and do a lot of the side things, because I feel like I've missed out on a lot, and I really want to know more about this ghost lady. I want to know who she is and how she fits into the puzzle. As one thing that The Evil Within 2 has done very well is that it has tied up a lot of the loose ends in regards to the story, so I think you guys are really gonna like it. And if you have already played it, I would love to know what you think about The Evil Within 2. I gotta say, regardless to not really liking the open world style of things, I really liked it. I just wish that it was a little bit darker, maybe more traps and things like that, because we had a lot of traps in the first game. There was a lack of bosses as well. I feel like towards the end of the game, I don't want to spoil too much in this video, but towards the end of the game, you had a lot of bosses that were coming from the first game, and it felt like there wasn't too much new coming through. I mean, those bosses to me were so iconic, so when I saw them again, I got really excited. But then it's like, I was thinking to myself, there was hardly any bosses in this game. There was not so much of like a scare factor or anything like that. I loved the story with Stefano. I thought that was really dark and eerie, and some of that was just straight messed up. But then after that, it just seemed to be like a second person had decided on a different, direction for the game to go. So it felt a little bit split in a way. I don't know, what do you guys think about that? It's almost like Metal Gear Solid 5 again, where you've got one person with one idea and someone else with a different idea. And again, while I overall liked the game, I feel like the story in that respect let it down. It felt like the whole thing with Stefano was like a cover-up to something else. But again, I would like to go through some of the side stuff to put more of the story pieces together. So in conclusion, I really liked the game. I really, really liked the game. I will play it again. It's got really good replay value. I would like to try it on some of the harder difficulties as well. Take aim assist off and see how I get on in the real world as you guys like to do it. And yeah, let me know guys what you thought of The Evil Within 2. I love to have a discussion with you all. This has been my overall review. I really liked it. I don't really give scores or anything like that, but I'm just gonna say it's a good game. You guys should play it if you like survival horror games. And as for me, I'm gonna go and play the new South Park. Bye guys!